So we're here today with Mayor Don Iveson, an old Gateway alumni.
Hack, please.
Hack. Okay, old Gateway hack, Don Iveson. And he's here to talk to us a little bit about his time at the Gateway. So thanks for talking to us today. So what was your experience like at the U of A on the academic side before we really get into what your time was like at the Gateway and took all your time away from school?
Well, that's usually my answer. I majored in the student newspaper when people ask, but I have a political science and philosophy degree from the university. I managed to do it in 4 years, despite the fact that I worked at the paper for a number of years. So most of my peers dragged on their degrees 7, 8 years because of the time they spent at the Gateway. But I managed to stay on track between summer school and night classes and everything else. And so I had a good balance that way. But, I was interested in, as I am now, in public affairs and public policy and advocacy and trying to make things better and trying to make a difference. And at the time, political science degree, maybe that was going to lead to law and legal advocacy. I'm still putting off the LSAT. And the student press seemed like another way to be involved and be active and be connected to community. And so that was my extracurricular activity on top of my sort of public interest, public policy focused degree.
Mm-hmm. And then you ended up working with the SU, correct, on the Universal Transit Pass after your time at the Gateway, right?
Yeah, I did about 9-10 years in the student press in various capacities. First as a student, and then 6 more years in student press. No, that's not right. I did when I was at university, I did 4 years, and then of Gateway stuff, and then I worked in Toronto for a year after that, and then I worked for Gateway for 3 years after that. So I guess it would have been 8 years with student press. And then when I was done with that, I went to work for the evil Students' Union, who we were always, combating with as the newspaper. And then I got to see things from the other side a little bit, doing government relations work for the undergraduate students. And yes, we worked on developing the UPass and some housing issues, all of which brought me to City Hall quite a bit more than I expected. And one thing led to another, and here I am.
Awesome. So do you remember at what point in your degree you kind of heard that the Gateway had a lot of volunteer opportunities?
I actually knew before I got there because the Gateway had come out to my high school. I went to Strathcona Composite here in Edmonton, and the couple of the editors came out to our sort of nerdy social studies advanced placement class, and also the folks who were involved with the high school paper, and I was the editor of the high school paper. They came out to pitch us on volunteering for the Gateway. So they were recruiting even when we were in high school. And so my good friend Dan Lazen, who was an editor-in-chief, he and I were both involved in our high school paper, and then we got sucked right in. And he even went to his first press night while he was still in high school. So he was even more hardcore than I am. But I followed him soon after.
Do you remember what your first article for the Gateway was?
I think it was a CD review. So it was starting easy with arts and entertainment. So I think my first gig was a CD review. I don't remember the CD though. It can't have been that good.
Do you remember getting edits on it?
I think it was. No, I don't think it got the heavy red pen treatment. My first news article got the heavy red pen treatment, and then I was like, screw it, I'm never writing for news again. I'm just gonna write opinion because then you can just focus on what you think rather than what other people think.
So what was your all-time favorite piece that you worked on that you can remember?
I don't know if I have a specific favorite, but one that's become infamous now is a satire piece that I wrote called Workers of the World Repose, which came back to bite me in the butt during the mayor's election when someone raised it and took it seriously and thought that this, what appears to be this like ridiculous socialist rant is, and it's obviously tongue-in-cheek. I mean, you can't read it. They must have just read the headline, right? But you can't read it and actually take it seriously. So it's probably the most widely read thing I ever wrote at the Gateway, and it just took 6 or 7 more years before people actually saw it. But that one is the most top of mind anyway. I'm not sure if it's definitely not the best thing I ever wrote, but it's the thing I can remember the most clearly.
Fair enough. So there's a lot of people who write those kind of less serious articles that could be taken
Personal
the wrong
anecdotal
way.
garbage. That was one of the categories when people told ridiculous stories about their lives. I preferred a little bit of satire, try to get a bit literary with it. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people wrote that I think that I regret over time.
Do you have any advice for those people as someone who's had to confront one of their university pieces?
Well, again, this was, I was involved with the Gateway Alumni Association, and we worked very closely with U of A libraries to digitize tens of thousands of pages of the Gateway going back to the very, very beginning, and it's all indexable and it's all searchable. And which meant I knew this. So if you're going to run for office, what you want to do is you want to get a researcher to go through, you want to have someone else look at all of this stuff and identify the threats, and then be prepared for when someone's going to whisk one of these articles out and say, I can't believe you wrote this, I can't believe you took this position. So the research tool is there now. Thank you to the generous support of the Peel's Prairie Provinces project at the archiving newspapers from across Western Canada, including the Gateway. So it's all there, it's easily enough found, and so do yourself a favor and know what's in there, or get someone to know what's in there if you're going to be in public life, because it's way too easy to find.
Okay. Well, good tips for a lot of people.
Pro tips.
So what's your favorite memory from your time at the Gateway?
Well, I have lots, and a lot of them center around fighting the good fight. I mean, there was a righteousness to being involved in the newspaper. From the time the Students' Union confiscated the paper during an SU election because they didn't like something that had been written in it that they thought would compromise the election, which was nonsense. And so we had this epic battle, and there was a hearing before a board to try to get the newspaper released from having been impounded. And at that moment in my life, that was like the most epic and controversial and morally black and white issue I had ever dealt with in my life. And so we were all just frothing. And so I think having the chance to have that kind of level of intensity and passion for something, I think that's, generally speaking, a very fond memory. But I think the best thing that happened is I met my wife through the paper, and so many Gateway marriages and long-term partnerships, and mine's just another one of those stories. But I do like to tell people that say, oh, how did you and Sarah meet? Oh, we met through the newspaper, which nobody gets anymore because no one meets through the newspaper. But people used to have personal ads in the newspaper, right? That's how people would meet. So you have to be like at least 35 to get that joke.
Okay. So is that like a 3 lines free thing, or?
No, we actually met because she was a writer at the newspaper.
Okay.
So it wasn't through the personals. That's the joke. But no, she was a writer, and she wrote mostly A&E, and she wrote a little bit of opinion, and we got to know each other, and we didn't actually connect until a few years later. But that's how we first got to know each other, was through the paper.
So I'm sure you heard by now we're going into a new model next year to try and adapt to the internet, as it's not going away, clearly. So with the new monthly magazine with online focus, how do you kind of feel about that as an alumni?
Well, I mean, I come from the ink-stained wretch age of things, right? But even then, we could start to tell that the internet was going to be disruptive, and I think we could only ever imagine the paper going from twice a week, which it was when I was there, maybe to once a week, and that it would change. So obviously, it's sort of beyond what we were able to imagine, even 10 years ago when I was involved. And so, it's sad. It's sad because we're attached to a particular way of doing things, but clearly the audience has moved on, and that's not just confined to campuses. It's probably happening even sooner in some ways on campuses. I think a lot of us maybe imagined that campus being sort of a closed community and not entirely closed, but sort of a coherent subgroup that's demographically pretty uniform in terms of its age, that advertisers would still want to go there, and that there would still be reasons for people to pick up newspapers if it was serving that community, and that might survive. And I think a magazine is a neat way to reposition around that. People still want the long read. But increasingly, this is my desk, right? I'm no different than university students and boomers who are increasingly doing everything electronically and everything on the go through a mobile device. So it's not that surprising, but it's still, it's hard to let go. When I used to deliver the newspaper, and so I literally had ink on my knuckles from carrying the bundles, right? So that, and the smell of newsprint, all of that nostalgia is there. So that part of my my scent memory, like deep animal brain memory, is a little bit sad. But these are big trends that are affecting media everywhere. I'm just glad I got out of media, frankly, at this point. No offense.
So for the staff going forward, what advice would you give to them?
Well, I think for me, the newspaper, and like I said, the smell of newsprint, the smell of ink, all of that becomes part of the experience. But I think what drew us all to the paper in the first place was a community of people who cared about issues, who cared about accountability, who cared about the truth, who cared about justice and advocacy for people who were sometimes voiceless in either the mainstream media or in a community like a campus. That ethic is very much alive and well and needed as much as ever in a society that's dominated by news that is very top down, very international, very sensational. And so there's still, I think, a thirst for and a need for coverage of what's going on in university governance, coverage of what's going on in student governance, accountability around those things, debate around the big decisions that will affect students as learners and as community members, and then the larger issues that we all debate as a society, but from a student perspective. I think there's still a need for that voice, and there's just different channels for having that dialogue within the community. And I think I think student newspapers have an opportunity to illustrate how to innovate, how to stay relevant, because they're connected to an audience that is already well ahead in terms of those trends. And so I think it's an interesting opportunity to reposition and to maintain that ethic that's connected in community and justice and truth and reporting and commentary and debate. Keep all of that alive, just change the platform. And so I wish the new Gateway the best of luck in that.
Okay, so the last question I had for you was, why is the Gateway important? Kind of already answered that. So those are really all the questions I have. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? A little tidbit?
I could tell all kinds of stories, but I won't.
Okay.
Because it's no longer in my interest. But no, I mean, I think for me, the thing that I'll remember most is, and everyone's going to say this, but the friendships that we made, and they were instrumental in my success, in my campaigns. They're people I still work with on lots of important things, people I stay connected with, and it's Gateway alum that are home at Christmas time or in the summertime who we connect with. That's my strongest circle from university. So those friendships I still really, really value.
Thank you so much for talking to us today.
My pleasure.